Cereal Box presents Remade. Season 2, Episode 9. Power Struggles. Written by E.C. Myers. Narrated by Laurel Schroeder. As the group marched to wherever Jingwei's glorified Roomba was taking them, Inez stuck firmly to the middle of the pack. She had agreed to this little excursion because more weapons would help them rescue Holden and the others from whatever mess they'd gotten into at Sanctuary. Plus, Inez wanted to show she could be a team player. Really. But she didn't want anyone to think of her as their leader anymore. This was not her freaking circus, and these were definitely not her damn monkeys. "You aren't fooling anyone," Saya said as she walked beside Inez. "At least, not me." "Say what?" Inez asked. "You keep saying you aren't in charge. I'm not." "The lady doth protest too much, methinks. You're still acting like you're responsible for the team. You keep glancing behind us to check that everyone's okay. Because if something gets the ones behind us, we're next. And the rest of the time your eyes are glued to Jingwei." "Jealous?" Inez asked. "Yeah, you two are perfect for each other." Saya laughed. "But I don't think she has room in her heart for anyone but Sparky." "That's what I'm worried about," Inez said. Saya lightly touched Inez's arm, and then removed her hand at just the right time. Anyone else, and Inez would have felt crowded and annoyed. But Saya seemed to get her. "I just can't help thinking, why her? Why did they bring her back when it could have been anyone?" Inez asked. "When it could have been Teddy," Saya said. Inez nodded. Without him, she felt alone here, even with so many other people around. Even with Saya always close by when she needed her. It had been the same when her father had died. Their tiny house was full of aunts, uncles, and little kids. But Inez had felt isolated, apart from everyone else. Being surrounded by people who depended on you, or always needed something from you, could be lonelier than being on your own. "What do you think of this Jingwei? Is she the way you remember?" Inez asked. Saya studied Jingwei. "Sometimes, but she's quieter. She keeps to herself more. The girl we knew, was really excited at figuring out solutions to problems, always finding ways to help us. She was easy to get along with. Why?" "Just wondering how much she's changed. If the caretakers changed her." Inez kicked a rock out of her way. "The keepers, you mean?" Saya said, reminding her of Jingwei's quaint name for the machines who had remade her this time around. Inez rolled her eyes. "What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other word, would—" She paused. "Still have thorns. And a caretaker by any other name would smell as likely to slice your nose off." Saya laughed. "I like calling them keepers. They can't all be caretakers, when some are good and some are bad. That's just confusing. If some of them are actually good. Jingwei trusts them. This Jingwei didn't experience that slaughter, when those machines killed her and her friends. This Jingwei doesn't have any friends, other than her little robot sidekick," Inez said. "I can't imagine what it was like to be on her own like that. She'd have to be a little different because of it, right?" Saya said. "She has a different set of memories that don't include us." Inez nodded. Who would she be now, if Teddy hadn't been there when she'd woken up in this world? Who would Teddy have become, if anyone else had been paired with him in that house? Or if he'd been a member of the group from the beginning? Since almost everyone knew him from his TV show, he might have defaulted to playing his character. Or maybe he would have had an even weaker grasp on reality. Would she want him back if he became a stranger? Ahead, Jingwei, Sparky, Gabe, Hiram, and Alex stopped at the top of a ridge. "Great, another break." Saya brushed against her shoulder. "Go on, you belong up there." Inez shrugged. She pushed her way forward, passing May, Sebastian, and Amelia, to stand beside Jingwei. I have a bum ankle, and even I don't need to stop every hour, Inez said. So that was a bit of an exaggeration. Her sprained ankle was pretty much healed by now, but she was trying to make a point. At this rate, we're never going to get wherever we're going. We're here. Jingwei pointed to a 5-story building in the valley below. Oh, Inez said. A broad, paved road leading to a wide door on the side of the weapons depot was overrun with thorny vines, like the forest of brambles in Sleeping Beauty. Tendrils crept up the walls, through broken windows, and into the building. Giggling behind them kind of broke the spell. Inez turned and saw Amelia and Sebastian holding hands and making big eyes at each other instead of at the intimidating sight below. The pair's touchy-feely thing was really getting on Inez's nerves. Not very friendly looking, Gabe said. He shielded his eyes from the sun as he looked down at their destination. Why would a weapons depot look friendly? Inez asked. Anyway, it's what's inside that counts. Talon flew in lazy circles over the spoiled landscape, completing the bizarre picture. Mountains and shining steel towers rose through the haze in the distance, the evening sky flush with red and orange and pink. It really was like they were in some fucked-up fairy tale. It's gonna be a pain getting there, through all those vines. Seiya looked over the side of the ridge. Yeah, but if this place has been totally abandoned, left to nature, that means caretakers haven't been maintaining it. Sparky whirred next to Jingwei. The girl put a hand on its back, and it settled down. Inez squinted down at the building. But we shouldn't just waltz right up to the entrance without scoping things out first. Jingwei shook her head. Sparky says it's safe. Inez straightened, ready to challenge her. We can't waste any more time if we want to save your friends, Jingwei said. Our friends, Inez said. I don't know them any more than I know you bunch. Then why do you care what happens to us? Jingwei looked at Sparky. She looked up at the sky. Because this is bigger than me. Bigger than any of us. We have something important to do, and our odds of success increase the more of us there are. You're unbelievable, Inez said. She'd wanted to hear that every life was sacred, or that Jingwei was helping them because it was the right thing to do, or some corny shit like that. Something that sounded goddamn human. We aren't parts in some big machine. We aren't easily replaceable, Inez said. Present company accepted. No, we aren't replaceable anymore. That's why every life counts. Inez wondered if the original Jingwei, no, the previous Jingwei, had felt the same way about people. Probably not. Back then, none of them knew they were actually copies of their former selves. Hey, you two coming? Seiya asked. Inez turned and saw the rest of the group already filing down the ridge, Hiram in the lead, his eyes on the Cumberbatch flying above. Talon found something, Seiya said. Inez shook her head. So much for strategy and caution. These guys really wanted to get themselves killed. Talon guided them to a path through the tangle of vines. Someone, or something, had hacked through, creating a rough, 10-foot-high tunnel straight to the depot. This seems ominous, Inez said. Hiram crouched. He pointed to the vines that were creeping across the ground, over the crushed remains of plant matter. Whatever made this path was large and heavy, but it also came through a while ago, he said. Nature's already trying to close up the wound. So it might still be there, on the other side, waiting for us, Gabe said. Maybe. It could have come back this way, but... Hiram frowned. These are caretaker tracks. Are you sure? If caretakers are anywhere near here, we should leave, Inez said. Hiram held up a hand. The prints are weird, though. They weren't made by a bunch of caretakers traveling together. I've seen that before. Look at how close they are together. He pointed. It's more like a bunch of caretaker legs, like a giant millipede. Inez shuddered. The good news is, I think it was actually going in the opposite direction, away from the depot. You think? He squinted at the tracks. It's hard to say. We should go around at least, just in case. That'll take hours, Maybe lose us the whole day, Jingwei said. Sparky can scout ahead, and we'll rush through. We'll get in and out of there as quickly as possible. Inez held her tongue, in order to read the others' reactions before she protested. They looked worried, but determined. Okay then, I guess we're gonna do this stupid thing. She swept a hand toward the entrance. After you. They hurried through the tunnel, among the vines. The thorny tendrils were woven like a tight basket, which made the walls on either side feel solid as cement. They blocked sound from outside and amplified the crunch, crunch, crunch of their feet on the dead branches carpeting the ground. Sunlight twinkled through openings in the canopy above them like distant stars. This is kind of beautiful, Saya said. Inez smiled at the way light dappled Saya's face as she turned to her. Beautiful, she agreed. When they emerged into a clearing by the depot, it was like sucking in air after holding your breath for a long time underwater. Inez jumped when a caretaker scuttled toward them, but when she saw its wooden leg, she recognized it as Sparky. See? Nothing to worry about, Jingwei said. The group approached the depot's entrance. The door looked like a hydraulic deal, with a split across the middle, the kind they had on airplane hangars. Deep gashes were scratched into the metal, sparkling in the light of the setting sun. They looked like massive claw marks. Yikes, Gabe said. The whole building was surprisingly old school, compared to the marvels of architecture in Arcadia. The only piece of future tech Inez saw was one of those ubiquitous hand scanners beside the door. Then Sebastian picked up something from the ground and examined it. A broken camera. Frayed wires dangled from where the camera had been attached above the door before something had pulled it down. Something really wanted to get in here, Amelia said. Probably means there's something good inside, Inez said. Gabe glanced at the hand scanner, then back at Inez. What are you looking at me for? Inez thought. Go for it, she said. Gabe put his hand on the panel. Nothing happened. Inez put her hand to the door next. Same result. So much for that, she said. Maybe it'll only respond to certain people, Saya said. Let me see. Jingwei stepped up, Sparky at her side. Inez backed away, and Jingwei scrutinized the panel. She pulled on it slightly, and the whole thing fell off the wall. It hung from 2 white ribbon cables, with a patchwork of green, yellow, and red wires spilling out around it, like copper and plastic guts. It's broken, Jingwei said. Duh, Inez said. Can you fix it? Jingwei ignored her. She pulled out her roll of makeshift tools, flat bits of metal, and odds and ends that looked like they'd been scavenged from other machines and parts. She examined the connections, occasionally pointing something out to Sparky, which clicked and rumbled. Good news, Jingwei said. It should work, but it doesn't have any juice. No one's paid the electric bill for a few hundred years, Gabe said. Jingwei disconnected a lead from the panel and held it out to Sparky. She pressed one hand to the scanner, and then Sparky, sparked. The panel flashed green, and the door began lifting up and folding onto itself, slowly and shakily. The metal shrieked. Bits of rust flaked down from the hinges and joints as the old door opened. It made it halfway up before the panel died again. Sparky sparked some more, but that was it. Oops, shorted something, Jingwei said. Oops, Inez echoed. The door was so massive, even halfway open, they could enter it without having to bend over. But it was dark, dark, dark inside. And it smelled funny. Sort of earthy and musty, with a hint of diesel. I'll take a look around first, Jingwei said. Slow your roll, Inez said. You're not going in there alone. The girl genius was not getting first crack at whatever weapons they might find in there. I have Sparky, Jingwei said. Yes? Well. She certainly wasn't going to let that caretaker out of her sight, especially considering it had brought them here. I'm coming too. And me, Saya said quickly. It could be dangerous. If it was, Inez didn't want anything to happen to Saya. "We're coming too," May said. Gabe nodded and folded his arms across his chest. Hiram raised his hand and waved it around eagerly, like he really wanted to answer a teacher's question in class. Amelia shrugged, but Sebastian grabbed her hand and whispered something in her ear, and she gave him a dopey grin. Ugh. "Splitting up seems like a bad idea right now," Gabe said. "Going in there seems like a bad idea," Inez said. "But I guess you can all do whatever you want. It's your—" She almost said funeral, but stopped herself just in time. "It's your circus." Talon flapped down and landed neatly at Hiram's side. The Cumberbatch scooped its nose under Hiram's hand, and he petted it. Inez just shook her head. "If we're gonna do this, let's do this." They still had a few of those glowing softballs that Loki had scavenged from Arcadia, though their light was noticeably dimmer and didn't do much to illuminate the inside of the depot. They were just toys after all, not meant to last. Jingwei flipped a switch to the right of the door, recognizable as a light switch. She flicked it on and off several times, but nothing happened. "Power's completely out." A beam of white light cut through the darkness. Inez flinched and reached for Saya, but it wasn't a deadly laser. Sparky's eye apparently had a flashlight setting, because of course it did. "That's handy," Gabe said. The spotlight swept across the open space and lingered on something shiny about 100 feet away. It was surrounded by a lot of other shiny things. It took a second for Inez to realize what she was looking at. "Get out!" Inez shouted. "Get out!" Gabby screamed from the bathroom. "I'm peeing!" "You've been in here forever. I have to go too," Carmen said. "Move over." "Ew, no! We can't share a toilet!" "Cállate!" Inez pressed a hand to her forehead. A killer headache was coming on, only partially due to her sisters screaming in the background. No matter how many times she went over the Takaria's books, she kept coming to the same conclusion. We're fucked. "That's what they get for drinking so much soda," Sophia said from one of the many empty tables in the small restaurant. Inez's younger sister was wrestling with math problems of her own in her workbook. She'd given up on fractions for the moment and was doodling a picture of Rainbow Dash in the corner. "You let them drink soda? Jesus," Inez said. "No, you did. I'm not the one in charge." Inez had been so caught up in the fact that the restaurant was slowly but surely going bankrupt, trying to figure out how they were going to eat, let alone pay off Poppy's hospital bills. And college was just a fading dream at this point, that she'd ignored her sisters until she couldn't anymore. "Sophia, if you see something, say something. Better yet, do something." "I am doing something. Homework." Gabby appeared with her pants still down and wearing a stormy expression. "Carmen interrupted me while I was peeing." She shuddered. "Pull up your pants. That's gotta be a health code violation. Were you reading Supergirl comics in the bathroom again?" "No." Gabby always said it that way when she was lying. "So you were taking too long. And next time, lock the door." "I did! She picked the lock." Inez turned toward the bathroom. "Carmen, did you pick the lock on the bathroom door?" "Uh-huh." "Put my lockpicks back when you're done," Inez said. "And don't go in my room again." "Okay," Carmen called cheerfully. "Happy now?" Inez asked Gabby. "Not even a little." "Congratulations, you're in the right family." Speaking of which, the bell on the door rang, and Inez saw Mommy and Tia Clara walk in. Mateo darted in from behind them, and her headache intensified. She loved him, but when all the kids got together, they combined to form Los Monstruos Pequeños, like some hyperactive, screaming, giggly, troublesome version of Voltron. So, nothing like Voltron, really, but Inez's brain had ceased to function an hour ago. She needed sleep, but she had to help make dinner when she got home, and put the little monsters to bed, and then do her own homework. And they were still broke. There was that. Inez's mother looked worried as she took in the empty taqueria. They should be in the middle of the dinner-time rush right now. But more and more, this was what business was like. If it got any worse, Inez would be in the back, making the tacos herself. "Please take them away," Inez said. "Inez," Mommy said. Uh-oh. She was using the voice. What had Inez done now? Mommy pulled an official-looking envelope from her purse. She slowly slid a folded paper out of it, opened it, smoothed it, and put it on the counter in front of Inez ceremonially. Was that a report card? "Do you know anything about, Mommy wrinkled her forehead. "Small business loan?" Inez perked up. "We got it? I'll take that as a yes. And did you lie and put Clara's name on the application?" Inez glanced at Tia Clara. She didn't look angry, unlike Mommy. Her aunt looked confused and worried. "No," Inez said. "Inez!" Mommy clicked her tongue. "How could you? You know how dangerous it is." "It's okay, Mommy. I did a ton of research. She has a green card, so there's no problem. That's probably why we got the loan in the first place. It's designed specifically to promote local business efforts." Inez grabbed for the paper. Holy shit, they got it. "We have to give the money back," Clara said. "What? No," Inez said. "What were you thinking, Inez? Taking on more debt when we still can't even pay for—" Mommy choked up. Oh no. Inez reached out a hand to her mother, but Mommy didn't take it. And now Gabby was starting to cry too. Damn it. "Sophia, take the kids out of here," Inez snapped. Sophia flounced. She slowly closed her workbook and slid off her stool. "Andale," Inez said. Sophia sped up incrementally and herded the other kids to the tiny stockroom in the back of the store. "Don't talk to your sisters that way. Only I'm allowed to treat them like that," Mommy said. "Why are you angry with me? This loan is a good thing. I have a plan." "That's what Alejandro also used to say. I have a plan, Rosita. I'll take care of you. Plans change. You can't eat plans. And we can't pay off your father's bills this way." Inez shook her head. "You're thinking too small." She pointed to the wall to their left. "We're going to use the loan to buy that abandoned rat trap next door and expand the restaurant. It's so disgusting over there. It's keeping customers away. The owner's checked out, practically forgot it's there. He's probably planning to burn it for the insurance money." That was Inez's plan D for the taqueria, if all else failed. "We can get it for a steal." "And what do we need with a bigger restaurant when we can't even fill this one?" Mommy asked. "Open a grocery store." Tia Clara laughed. Mommy put her hand to her forehead. "Inez," Mommy said. "Es loco." Inez had worked it all out. They would open the store Poppy had always dreamed about, stocked with specialty items from Mexico that you couldn't get here. They'd even be able to employ some of her father's family from back home, after shipping them to the States. The store would drive business to the taqueria, and the taqueria would drive business to the store. Recipes, ingredients, and supplies to make authentic Mexican tacos at home. That kind of thing. Everyone wins. "Papi would understand," Inez said. "This place was his life. I'm not going to let it die too." "I hate this taqueria," Mommy said. She looked shocked for a moment, but there was no taking that back. "It's just a thing. You have to think more about your family." "I am, Mommy. I always am. And so did Papi." "You also have to think about yourself sometimes," Mommy added softly. Then she shook her head. "We'll talk about this later." Inez hid a smile. Mommy's "we'll talk about this later" could usually be turned into a yes. Inez would show them this was going to solve their problems. All she had to do was work even harder and figure out how to add another 5 hours to her day. No problem. Hiram and Alex looked startled when Inez and the others came rushing out of the building. They had their hands on Talon's neck and back, but he suddenly broke free of them and leapt into the air with a chilling cry. What happened? Hiram asked. Caretakers! A crap ton of them! Inez waved the others on. Get to higher ground! Hide! Get moving! She pushed Hiram and Alex along. What about you? Hiram asked. She turned and looked back at the depot. Jingwei and Sparky hadn't emerged, which meant they were either in trouble or they were up to something. The smart thing to do would be to leave her. She'd proven she could take care of herself. I'll be all right, Inez said. Inez, Saya said. Of course, she hadn't run off without her. Inez hugged her and then gently shoved her away. Please, go. If Saya really understood Inez the way she seemed to, she wouldn't push on this. Be careful. Come on, you guys. Saya shepherded Hiram and Alex away. Didn't even look back at Inez. Good. Inez glanced up as Talon winged overhead. Too bad Cumberbatches couldn't breathe fire or anything useful like that. But Talon might be able to take 1 or 2 caretakers out with his fierce pooping prowess. That thing practically crapped out dark matter. Inez hurried back toward the depot before she could change her mind. Every molecule in her body urging her to go the other way. When she reached the door, she squeezed her glow ball. It was definitely fading. She smacked it hard against her palm a couple of times. That felt good, and it brightened a little. She took a breath and stepped into the building. It was quiet, except for faint mechanical sounds and metallic taps echoing from a distance. A beam of light ahead glinted at Inez, and she headed toward it. She thought ruefully of the old joke about the light at the end of the tunnel being an oncoming train, until she realized it was Sparky's headlight. The machine and Jingwei were strolling toward her, as though there weren't a crap ton of caretakers. Inez decided that had to be the official term for a group of those things. Right behind them. What the hell? Inez said. Why aren't you dead? Jingwei's mouth quirked. Haven't we been over this already? There was a crap ton of caretakers back there. Yeah, turns out they're harmless. Caretakers are very much not fucking harmless, Inez said. They are when they're broken. Oh. Inez suddenly felt sheepish. Then we were lucky. You thought this place was full of caretakers, but you came back for me? Jingwei asked. I have a bad habit of trying to save people. Inez turned around and stomped back toward the door. She heard Sparky's legs click and whir rhythmically, so she knew it and Jingwei were following her. What's the deal bringing us to Caretaker Central anyway? I didn't know what we would find here. Sparky said he was taking us to something that would help. Weapons, you said. Jingwei caught up and walked alongside her, the caretaker a few steps behind them. I never said that specifically. We guessed from what he was showing me. Talking to Sparky isn't exactly a science. Apparently, his idea of help is more caretakers. Not too surprising, really. I guess we've wasted a trip, Inez said. Her glow ball flickered and went out. She shook it a few times, then hurled it into the darkness ahead of her. Maybe not. I think we can salvage some of them, Jingwei said. There was the door. Why would we want to do that? That's a big nope. Inez walked out of the depot. Talon was rolling around on the ground with her abandoned glow ball in his mouth. She stalked past him and headed for the turn in the road where she assumed the others were hiding. On the pavement, or whatever the road was made of, Sparky's steps sounded like the skittering of a giant, creepy cockroach. She didn't know which made her skin crawl more. That horrible sound, or knowing that a caretaker, even a supposedly friendly one, was right behind her. So, that's it? You don't even want to discuss it? We aren't going to have another prolonged debate? Jingwei called. No debate needed. It's simple. 2 legs, good. 4, 6, 8 plus legs, very, very bad. Inez glanced at Sparky. 1 caretaker is bad enough. Saya, Gabe, and May emerged from behind a large boulder jutting out from the cliff wall along one side of the road. I guess caretakers aren't after us, if you guys are arguing again, Gabe said. They're broken. Nothing to worry about, Jingwei said. There's always something to worry about, Inez muttered. She rounded the boulder. It was hiding a barely noticeable crevice in the wall. Nice hiding spot. Hiram found it, Alex said as he emerged, Hiram close behind. He immediately looked up and smiled when Talon streaked by overhead. Is that a ball in his mouth? Hiram asked. Inez waved off his question. Where are Amelia and Sebastian? They'd either fallen into a ravine and died, or... They were right behind me, Hiram said. Guys! Really? Inez bellowed into the cave. A moment later, the pair crawled out, looking much more mussed than everyone else. So what do we do now? Saya asked. Inez tossed up her hands. We get some rest tonight. Tomorrow morning, May leads the way to Sanctuary. Too bad it's in the opposite direction we've been traveling for days, and we have nothing to show for it. There are parts we can use here. Maybe some of the keepers haven't been damaged, Jingwei said. That'd be a good thing? Gabe asked. Those keepers have been here a long time. If we found some that still work, they might not have gone feral. She waved her hand. The programming of those other machines was likely corrupted because they were running continuously for centuries. They lost their minds, May said. They don't have minds, Inez said. Artificial intelligence is still intelligence, Jingwei said. And remember, we wouldn't be here if not for the keepers. I doubt they were programmed to deal with any of this. Bringing us here required substantial out-of-the-box thinking. You're saying if we found some mint-condition collector's item caretakers, they might not want to hurt us, Gabe said. It's worth a shot, Jingwei said. And there might be other things we can use there. Food, supplies. We should at least explore the rest of the building. We came all this way. Maybe we should hear her out, Saya whispered to Inez. Inez bit her lip. She could almost hear Teddy saying those exact words in his doofy, frat boy voice. He'd always thought the best of people, and not only because he thought they were all figments of his own imagination. He thought the best of Inez when no one else did, and he'd never led her wrong. Inez narrowed her eyes at Jingwei. Is this you talking or Sparky? That thing brought us here, so of course it would want us to turn on more caretakers. Jingwei looked offended. I speak for myself, though Sparky does agree with me. I know it's hard for you to believe, but we're on your side. Jingwei tilted her head thoughtfully. The side of humans, I mean. Thanks for clarifying that, Inez said. We can just turn on one of them, so you can see it's safe. Inez, at some point you have to stop thinking and planning and worrying, and just do something. Even if you aren't sure it's the right thing to do. Doing nothing is worse, and a stupid way to die. Well, okay. We have a safe hiding spot, thanks to Hiram. Anyone who thinks turning on another caretaker is a terrible plan, or needs to get some sleep, should stay here. It's getting dark, Hiram said. Shouldn't we all wait until morning? It's dark inside the building anyway. Our glow balls are almost dead, and I don't think we should lose any more time, Inez said. Inez thought for sure that Amelia and Sebastian would want to stay behind and cozy up in the cave together. But in the end, no one decided to stay behind, so they all trooped back to the caretaker depot. The building seemed more sinister as the evening shadows crept in. It's creepier knowing that it's full of killing machines, isn't it? Inez said to Saya. Potential killing machines. But you could say the same about people, Inez said. Good point. They reached the door to the depot and paused, listening. No skittering metal feet, whirring mechanical parts, or humming electronics. Nothing at all, except a distant, steady dripping. Jingwei and Sparky led the way, with the caretaker's spotlight blazing, and the rest of the group filed in behind them. Gabe flipped the light switch on and off again, but the power was still out. Did you think Jingwei did it wrong before? May asked mildly. No, Gabe shook his head. Force of habit. Inez heard Hiram and Alex speaking softly but urgently at the door. She turned back to see what was going on. What's up? Inez asked. Talon won't come inside, Hiram said. Talon's smarter than all of us. Who wants to hang out with a bunch of caretakers? He probably likes it better outside anyway. I don't think we should leave him out here, Hiram said. Talon was on his own long before we showed up. He may be small, but he isn't a helpless puppy. Inez put a hand on Hiram's back. He's like a guard dog, with wings and 2-inch long teeth and claws. We're still pretty sure he can't breathe fire, right? I don't think so, Hiram said. Shame. Well, how about you 3 stay here, if you're worried about him? Since we can't close the door, it would be great to have someone watching the entrance. If you see or hear anything move outside, come warn us, all right? Hiram cheered up a bit. We can do that. I think he's got pretty good night vision and super hearing. Terrific. I feel safer already. Which was a lie, because she was more afraid of what was inside the building than whatever was lurking outside. And truthfully, even a friendly dragon was freaking terrifying. It was still a wild animal, and even trained animals lashed out and attacked their owners from time to time. She didn't like the idea of Hiram messing around with it, but he obviously needed a project right now, and it seemed to have fostered a friendship between him and Alex. Okay, you keep an eye on Talon. She turned to Alex. And you keep an eye on Hiram. I don't think that will be a problem, Saya murmured as they walked away. Those kids are too cute. You handled that really well. Inez shrugged. If this goes south, they'll have a chance to get away. They caught up with the others and found Jingwei crouched in front of a caretaker, Sparky shining a light on it as she tinkered with it. Now that Inez wasn't panicking and running for her life, she discovered it was one of only a handful of caretakers that were still standing, and the only one that looked more or less intact. It was an exact duplicate of Sparky, minus the battle damage and wooden leg. In fact, it looked brand new, all clean and shiny, like C-3PO at the end of Star Wars, Episode 4. The light reflecting off it showed that the other caretakers around it were also shiny, but incomplete. One was missing its eye lens, frayed wires hanging from the dark socket. Another had no arms. One had its chest exposed, the access panel lying crumpled at its feet, the insides gutted and broken. Looks like vandals got in here, Inez muttered. Jingwei, can you shine that light over here for a second? Ask Sparky, Jingwei said. Seriously? Inez sighed. Sparky, shine your light over here. Sparky ignored her. Inez gritted her teeth. Please. Sparky swept its eye beam toward her, and then scanned the rest of the room. Beyond the cluster of standing caretakers, the floor of the cavernous room was littered with caretaker body parts. Holy shit, Gabe said. Caretaker legs were scattered everywhere, like discarded chicken bones. Computer chips, wires, and tubing glinted in the light. Most disturbing of all, the center of the room was taken up by a large mound of caretaker heads. Hundreds of them. Inez shuddered at the sight. There was no love lost between her and the machines, but whatever had done this had been full of malice, like the boys who had pulled the arms off Inez's Barbie dolls at the playground, until she made them stop by shoving the arms up their noses. Years later, Gabby had chosen her old Barbie de Milo as her favorite toy. She dug up one of its missing arms and taped it back on. Sparky's light went wild, just before flickering out. The room filled with shadows cast by the fading glow balls. Creepy, Amelia said. This didn't happen by accident, Inez said. Someone or something came here and did that. It could come back. Hell, for all we know, it's still here. Inez lifted the caretaker arm slung across her back and hefted it. Then she suddenly felt self-conscious, given the casual brutality of the disassembled caretakers before them. Taking this arm had been a matter of survival, but also defiance, to show the caretakers that she was going to fight back. She wondered if Sparky was bothered by it. She would be if she saw someone casually carrying around a human arm or leg. Since when do I care how Sparky feels? She thought. Since it became obvious that he has feelings. If Sparky was petty enough to care whether she said please and thank you, there was more to him than she thought. The group fell silent as they considered the macabre scene in front of them, and strained to listen for anything moving around. The only sound was a drip, drip, drip from some distant leak in the building. "Did you find anything, Jingwei?" Saya whispered. "There's no reason why this one shouldn't work," Jingwei whispered. Slowly, Sparky's eye began glowing again, this time with a softer, more diffuse light, chasing the shadows farther back. Jingwei ran a hand through her hair, making it stick out at odd angles. Inez noticed a small burn scar just above her right temple that had been covered by her hair before, some memento of her adventures before meeting up with them. Jingwei continued. "Near as I can tell, some of these keepers aren't broken after all. They're in a power save mode, like when you suspend a laptop," May said. "Sure. They're on standby to conserve battery. I tried to switch it on." "What?" Inez said. "Maybe check with us before you do something like that." Jingwei shrugged. "It didn't work anyway. Sparky tells me the keeper I was working on is scanning for a signal. I'm just guessing, but it looks like it needs to receive a command to activate it. Sort of like password protection. Probably to prevent people like us from coming in here and doing what we're trying to do." "So there were safety measures," Inez said. "That's good to hear." "I bet you can send the signal from a terminal somewhere in this building," Jingwei continued. "But even if we found one, it wouldn't have power." "Hey, we tried." Inez put away her weapon. "I didn't figure you for someone who gives up easily," Jingwei said. "She isn't," Gabe said. The others laughed. "I know when to cut my losses," Inez said. "Do you?" Jingwei asked solemnly, staring right at her. Inez looked away. "I'm getting some real negative vibes from this place. I think we should go." "We leave, and do what? Go to Sanctuary, and fall into the same trap as your friends? What happens if we can't save them? Do you give up then? Or maybe we just write them off now? Because, honestly, they're probably dead already." Saya made a soft sound. Inez took her hand. "I admit, we only have a slim chance here," Jingwei said. "But it's the best chance for your friends. For Holden, Nevaeh, Loki, Cole, and Sunita. Even one more caretaker on our side will help." "You remember their names," Inez said, stunned. "I've got a good memory for people," Jingwei said. "Don't forget Umta," Sebastian said quietly. "But I'm not perfect," Jingwei added. Inez grimaced. "Well, shit. Okay, let's try to make this work. I still don't like it, but I don't see a better option. Is that good with you guys?" They all nodded. "Then I guess it's good with me too." She rubbed her hands. This was more familiar ground for her. "So, we need to figure out what's wrong with the power, and find a computer or a command center or something. I hate to say it, but we should split up." "Electrical stuff tends to be in basements," Jingwei said. "I'll see if that's true here." "Gabe, go with her," Inez said. "That's all right. I have Sparky," Jingwei said. "Nice. Thanks," Gabe said. May snickered. "This is how we do things," Inez said. Jingwei stared Inez down, but Inez held her ground. Jingwei threw up her hands. "Fine. The rest of us will spread out and explore this floor. Buddy system. We have 2 lights, so we can do 2 groups of 2 or 3, Inez said. "Be my buddy?" Saya fluttered her eyes at Inez. "I thought you'd never ask," Inez said. May looked between her 2 choices, Amelia and Sebastian, or Inez and Saya. She shook her head. "I'll go with them." "Suit yourself," Inez said. "You 3, take the left side of the building, and we'll take the right. We'll meet in the middle, unless one of us finds something, like the control room." "What do we do if we find something?" Amelia asked. "Shout," Inez said. "What do we do if something finds us?" Sebastian asked. Shout and run. Find everything you were looking for? Inez asked Jacob, one of the store's regulars. As always, and a lot of stuff I didn't know I needed. Inez smiled as she rang up his purchases. It looked like he was having a tamale night. We're getting more ingredients in every week. How's school going? Too many cooks in the kitchen? I'd imagine so. Jacob was attending culinary school, and he'd sent a lot of business to the grocery store, which the family had unanimously named Puppies. Inez loved that they had regulars, like Jacob and Mrs. Ramos, the elementary school teacher who thought the way to a man's heart was through his stomach. Since Inez's family had opened the store 2 months ago, the number of customers had steadily increased, seriously cutting into her reading time at work, and business was up at the taqueria, too. Mommy seemed relieved to get away from the kitchen and work the counter, throwing herself into the new business almost as much as Inez did. This was what they had all needed, and not just because of the money. Tia Ava had stopped talking about taking her twin girls back to Mexico. She had more to do in the restaurant, so she no longer worried she was adding to their burden. Even in death, Papi was helping to hold them together. Inez was feeling pretty good about herself for making all this work, until Ramon, Lita, and Callie walked in. Normally, she'd be thrilled to see them, though it always felt weird when she had to serve her friends. But this time, Astrid, the new girl at school, was with them. Astrid, the most recent girl to make Inez's blood rush. Inez wasn't getting much sleep these days, but when she did, Astrid frequently appeared in her dreams. Hey, girl, Ramon said. What are you doing here? Inez said, more harshly than she'd intended. Mommy looked over at her curiously. It's taco time! Ramon rubbed his belly. It's always taco time with you, Lita said. Tic-taco, tic-taco, Ramon grinned. One more taco pun and you're banned for life, Inez said. Tacos are next door. She turned away and pretended to be checking the inventory list on the laptop. Another long overdue innovation made possible by the small business loan. Inez, have you met Astrid? Callie asked, knowing the answer full well. Inez closed her eyes briefly before pasting on a smile and turning back around. We've run into each other once or twice. Inez is always running someplace, right? Astrid said. Like the man said, tic-taco, tic-taco. I can't believe I just said that. I mean, there's lots to do. Never enough time. Inez mentioned you just moved here, Astrid, Mommy said. Inez blushed. Oh, God. Now she knows I've been talking about her, and thinking about her, and... That's right, Mrs. Flores. Please, call me Rosa. Such a pretty name, Astrid said. Like Inez. Inez blushed harder. Mommy smiled. Inez, why don't you spend some time with your friends at the taqueria? I can manage here. Tell Eva their meal is on the house. I have inventory to do. Inez picked up the laptop and waved at her friends. Callie, you tell Eva. Inez, Lita said. She rolled her eyes at Astrid in an obvious way. But fortunately, Astrid was looking at Mommy. Oh, no, I couldn't, Mrs. Flores. Rosa, Mommy reminded her. Rosa. We stopped by because my mom has a pretty popular food blog and Instagram, and she often sends me to check out the food first. I probably shouldn't be telling you that. Oops. Anyway, I can't accept a free meal, because someone might think that influenced her opinion. But I'll happily take you up on that another time. She was looking at Inez now. Even if Astrid were flirting with her, which she totally wasn't, Inez couldn't lose focus on the business now that it was starting to go well. She didn't have time to sleep, let alone date anyone. She'd tried that before, and even the most casual relationships, on the order of hooking up in an empty classroom at school, ultimately fell apart. Sure, enjoy your dinner. Inez turned away. After Inez's friends had moved next door, Ramon doing his ridiculous taco dance the whole way, Mommy turned to Inez. Astrid seems like a nice girl, she said. I guess. I really do have to do inventory, Inez said. It could have waited a few minutes. Mommy put a hand on her forehead. I'm worried about you, mija. Inez pressed her fingertips to the gold crucifix around her neck, a quinceañera gift from her puppy that had probably put at least one of the nails in his coffin. She had to believe that if you did something for your family, even sacrificing your happiness, it couldn't be wrong, no matter what. Don't be worried, she smiled. I've got this. Inez and Saya discovered alcoves along the right wall of the main room, filled with different models of caretakers. Some of them were as large as Sparky, about 5 feet tall, but with different arm attachments, shovels and scissors, and nightmare fuel like that. Some were squat, knee-height, and built like tanks, with treads instead of legs, and others had tiny heads with eye stalks. Unlike the dismantled caretakers in the big room, those Inez was already thinking of as the basic Model S line, named for Sparky. She estimated about a couple hundred units that looked like they might function if they could be activated successfully. She and Saya only took enough time to shine their steadily dimming light into each alcove to see whether it had caretakers or computers. The floor of one of the alcoves had been ripped up. They approached the pit and peered inside. A tunnel? Saya asked. It's like something dug its way out. It also could be an entrance, Inez said. Remember those gashes in the front door? Maybe whatever did that did this too. When it couldn't get past the door, it made a new way inside. They stared at the dark pit. The floor was made of several inches of metal, and the ground beneath looked like solid bedrock. It would have taken a long time to tunnel through it. Let's keep moving, Saya whispered. They continued on to the far wall of the room quickly. They worked their way along it to the left and arrived at a door, or what was left of one. Something had pried it off its hinges and tossed it away, conveniently getting them around the hand scanner on the wall beside the entrance, which they couldn't have used anyway without power. Inez raised her caretaker arm as Saya shined the light into the room. Jackpot, Inez said. This room looked like NASA mission control, with a big screen and several smaller stations flanking it. Better still, no caretakers in sight. We're the first ones here. She grinned at Saya. Oh, thank goodness. Chairs. Saya put the glow ball on a desk and sat in a chair. We've been on our feet for hours. Saya leaned on the edge of the desk and grinned as Saya slowly spun her seat around. Hey, it's good to have you back, Saya said softly. What do you mean? You're acting more like your usual self. Inez felt a stab of irritation, but she held her tongue and tried to figure out why she was annoyed. Inez had changed after Teddy had died. She knew that. If she could go back to normal, whatever that was, so soon after losing him, then that seemed somehow disrespectful. But what bothered her most was that she hadn't felt like herself for a very long time, even before she was remade. When Poppy had died, Inez had immediately become the person everyone needed, the person she thought they needed. She'd pushed aside everything else, including her own needs and her very identity. In fact, she'd only started to feel like the old Inez after she had been remade, when no one else had any expectations of her. And even then, she only let her guard down with Teddy. And now Saya. Saya stopped the chair spinning. Did I say something wrong? Inez reached out for her. I don't think that's even possible. Oh, it's possible, all right. Well, then it wouldn't matter. Saya stood and took her hands, and Inez threaded their fingers together. She wasn't going to miss out on what she wanted anymore. She pulled Saya close and kissed her. Saya's fingers tightened around hers, but then she was kissing Inez back. When they paused, Saya murmured, Shouldn't we let the others know we found the computer room? Nah, they'll find it soon anyway. So we'd better not waste any time. Inez squeezed the light on the desk to turn it off. Each of them fumbled around a bit in the darkness. Inez could tell Saya was letting her take the lead. But soon, she started to make her own tentative moves. Inez was a taut guitar string that vibrated at the slightest touch, and Saya made her whole body sing. She was a goddamn Broadway musical. Then suddenly, the lights sprang on. Inez and Saya untangled from each other and turned to see May staring at them from the open door. Saya said. I guess Jingwei turned on the electricity. I guess she's not the only one. May smirked and then left. Saya covered her face with her hands and laughed. The screens around them flickered on, and a gentle female voice spoke. It sounded a lot like Arcadia had. The screen on the desk flashed images of caretakers working. In gardens, fields, offices, warehouses, suburban American streets. Great. Looks like commercials survived the end of the world, too, Saya said as they turned to watch. Who cares for our caretakers? Trademark. Who cares? Our evolutionary, state-of-the-art caretaker, trademark, was designed to be sturdy, reliable, and disposable. If it can't repair itself, just return it to the factory, and a replacement unit will be dispatched immediately upon receipt and inspection. Or, for a nominal fee, you can keep your original unit as a source for parts throughout the year. A cost-effective solution for customers with many units requiring maintenance and support. Remember, reduce, reuse, recycle, and recondition. The video showed a caretaker dismantling itself, while a white dude smugly looked on, arms crossed. Ugh. Inez had no love for the machines, but Sparky sometimes seemed like a living creature, with thoughts and agendas, and even feelings that could be hurt. Maybe it was all an illusion, or they were reading more into their actions. But if not... That's messed up, Inez said. It was even more sickening to watch, as one by one, damaged caretakers marched themselves into a deep pit of broken units, like some horrific mass grave. Then another caretaker that resembled a small fire truck sprayed a black and shiny liquid over the pile of writhing machines. And they started melting. Inez covered her mouth and suppressed a gag, even as part of her wondered if there was a supply of that stuff somewhere here in the depot. Then all they would need were squirt guns. Is your caretaker, trademark, acting up, or simply not performing to your expectations? Use our Kill Switch app to send a remote signal to lock your unit in place and summon a 24-hour service technician to evaluate it. We can also... I've seen enough. Inez pushed the screen away, and the video froze. She tapped at the screen for a while, trying to figure out where the caretaker controls were, but she couldn't make sense of the interface. So, she and Saya headed back to the building's entrance, arriving just behind Amelia and Sebastian. Jingwei, Gabe, and May were already there. Good job restoring the power, Inez said. It wasn't that hard. There was a critical failure at the source. I'm wondering if it was that hydroelectric dynamo we encountered on the way here, Jingwei said. Oops, Inez thought. The backup generator didn't kick in automatically for some reason, but I managed to switch it on manually. No telling how long it will last. May said you found the computer room? Inez nodded. Saya's face flushed. Why didn't you activate the keepers? Jingwei said. Couldn't figure out the controls, Inez said. I defer to your expertise. Great, let's... They jumped as a horrible screeching came from the door, and Helen darted inside and launched into the air. Hiram and Alex ran in behind him. What now? Inez asked. Big thing coming! Hiram and Alex kept running toward Inez. Hiram stopped just behind her and turned to point at the entrance. Talon dropped down and landed in front of him and Alex and spread his wings to keep them behind him. A big thing? And then Inez saw it. It was massive. An abomination. A mechanical monster so tall, it had to duck under the door to enter the building. It was crab-shaped, with haphazard layers of metal plating welded together into a heavy shell. To support that weight, it scuttled on dozens of mismatched legs. One bulky arm had a large pincher at the end of it. Another had a long, flat blade like a shovel, but this one looked wicked sharp. The third arm— oh shit, it has 3 arms— had some kind of Swiss Army attachment, a multi-tool that rotated through different choices quickly. Then the arm lashed out and knocked some of the standing caretakers out of its way with an awful crash. "What the hell is that?" May asked. "Does it matter? Run," Gabe said. "May, take everyone to the control room," Inez said. She wanted to get a better look at the robo-beast, so she fought the urge to run. And it wanted to get a better look at her, with its hundreds of unblinking eyes. The sight reminded her of the compound eyes of a bug, with all those lenses clustered together around its cylindrical head. "Inez?" Saya asked. Of course she had stayed by Inez's side, for better or worse. Inez didn't risk a glance back, but she hoped the others had headed for safety, wherever that might be. "I think it's a caretaker," Inez said. "Or it was. It must have stolen parts from the ones here. It grafted them onto itself. Look at all those legs." "It's horrible. What do we do?" Saya said. "We can't get around it," Inez said. It was blocking the whole exit. "Fall back to the control room." She retreated a few steps, reaching for Saya's hand. When she felt it, she grabbed on, turned, and they ran. "There's no door on the control room," Saya said, breathing hard. "It wouldn't hold up against that thing anyway," Inez answered. Actually, she was pretty sure it had torn the door off earlier, probably while looking for more caretaker parts for its collection. They ran into the control room. Inez did a quick head count. They were missing someone. "Shit, where's Hiram?" she said. Alex's eyes widened. "He was right behind me." Alex looked around. "Talon isn't here either." "I'll go get them," Inez said. Then she heard a strange grating sound behind her, like metal being crushed. Turning, she saw the super caretaker at the door, at least 4 times as large as Sparky, and seemingly made out of smaller caretakers. It lowered its head and lunged toward her, but it was too wide to enter the room. Its eyes started glowing red. "Get clear of the door!" A concentration of red laser beams flashed from its many eyes and vaporized a hole in the center of the room's view screen. Inez smelled ozone and scorched metal, and the temperature in the room went up several degrees. "Stay out of its line of sight," Amelia said. The super caretaker poked its head into the room and rotated it. Lenses were placed all around it, giving it 360 degrees in which to shoot. "Move!" Inez bolted forward, so they were out of range of the door. She heard sizzling and popping behind her, as tiny lasers flashed from the spinning head like some deadly disco ball. "Ow, fuck!" Gabe clutched his arm. Smoke wisped from the sleeve of his jacket. He peeled back the blackened cuff and examined a nasty burn across the outside of his wrist. It could have been worse. At least he didn't have a hole in him. They huddled behind a large console at the far end of the room, figuring it would provide some cover from the laser fire. But the super caretaker was straining at the doorway, and the metal on either side was beginning to bend. "What do we do about Hiram?" Alex whispered. "Keep this thing's attention on us so it doesn't go after him," Inez said. Hopefully he would do the smart thing and hide or get out of there. If he was still alive. The super caretaker settled down in the doorway, rotating its head and firing an occasional beam into the room. "We're trapped unless we can shut it down." Inez looked at Jingwei. "This is a control room for the caretakers, right? Can you turn that thing off?" Jingwei was crouched next to Sparky at one of the terminals, as indecipherable emoji text scrolled over it. A plug ran from its access panel to a port on the computer. Inez realized Jingwei and Sparky had been there the whole time, even while the rest of them were dodging those laser beams. Some scorches on the desk and wall around her showed how lucky and brave Jingwei had been. Or just totally focused and oblivious to the danger, which seemed more likely. "I don't think so. It looks pretty far gone." However, Jingwei looked up from the screen. You won't like this idea. Try me, Inez said. We could activate all the keepers at the same time. Wouldn't that make this situation worse? Inez said. She ducked and flinched as a laser beam sizzled over their heads. There's like 200 of them. It's already pretty bad, May said. But Hiram's out there, Alex said. Sparky thinks it will help. That's why he brought us here, Jingwei said. This is probably the clearest he's ever been with me. The alternatives are that thing gets in here and kills us all, or it waits outside the door and we starve to death. Jingwei's words from earlier came back to her, about needing to do something, even if you weren't sure it was right. People thought Inez was impulsive and reckless, but her choices were always deliberate. Whether she was jumping in the water to save her cousin, setting fire to a house to cover her escape, or climbing under a moving train. If ever there was a moment to simply act, this was it. Do it, Inez said. Turn them on. Jingwei grinned. I'm glad you said that, because Sparky just did. Inez glared at her. Not cool, Jingwei. It wasn't me. Jingwei stood and rubbed her hands together. Sparky did it, on his own. That didn't reassure Inez at all, but that was a discussion for later. If there was a later. They listened for a moment, slowly approaching the door. Inez heard scuttling, scraping, whirring machinery outside. Then, suddenly, a metallic screaming. Inez surged forward, followed by the others, and got to the center of the room. Talon flapped above the bizarre sight of the super caretaker, surrounded by all the other, smaller caretakers. The behemoth snapped at them with its arms, trying to push forward. But for every caretaker it knocked away, 2 others closed the gap and pressed in more, tightening the circle. The super caretaker turned and flailed about, sending more caretakers flying. Then one of the heavy-duty construction bots seized on one of its legs and twisted. It snapped. Rather than toss the leg away, the bot tucked it safely into its rear compartment. The super caretaker went berserk. More caretakers grabbed onto its legs, pulling them off like a child plucking legs from an insect. Maybe we can sneak out while they're occupied, Saya whispered. The activity seemed to pause for a moment. The super caretaker and the others were poised, assessing one another. Then the caretakers rushed forward, climbing all over the large beast, tearing it apart, piece by piece. It was just a machine, but Inez looked away until it was over. It was over quickly. When she looked back, the super caretaker was utterly gone. All that remained was a pile of parts. Hiram? Inez called. Alex joined her. Hiram! A pile of caretaker heads in the corner shifted, and Hiram's head poked out of it. Thank God, Inez said. What happened? Alex asked. Talon wanted to stay out here. I couldn't leave him, Hiram said. Inez shook her head. The group of functional caretakers had thinned considerably following the battle. Maybe half of them were still functioning, occupied with carting away parts from the super caretaker, almost reverently, to the alcoves along the room. Now what? Inez said. Can we program them to help us? We don't program them. We talk to them, Jingwei said. You should probably leave that part to me. Inez was so shocked that the plan had actually worked that she didn't even feel irritated. Sparky stood with 4 other caretakers. The scariest of them was horse-sized, with 3 legs on either side of it and a scooper on a flexible tail, so it looked like some kind of scorpion. A scoopion. Dios mío, she was tired. The second was short and broad, with thick tractor treads, powerful arms, and clawed hands. And the third was small and spidery, low to the ground. It had 8 legs and a single eye on a telescoping stalk. The 4th caretaker was identical to Sparky, only brand new, shiny and perfect, and more intimidating too, with its cricket legs fully extended, so it towered a couple of feet over the others. They're representatives, Inez said. The 4 biggest groups of caretakers all seem to be based on one of these 4 models. Kind of blows your mind, right? Saya said. Jingwei stood beside Sparky. I know you must be very disoriented. A lot has happened to this world since you were switched off. We are the only humans remaining on the planet. She gestured to the rest of the teens. Us and our friends. They're trapped in a place called Sanctuary. We woke you up, and we hope we can rely on your help as well. Do you think they understand that? Inez asked. I think that's more for our benefit than for them, Saya said. The conversation went on for a while, though most of it was happening on whatever communications channel the caretakers used that humans, other than Jingwei, couldn't listen in on. When it became clear that nothing would happen quickly, the group settled on the floor and dozed off. Alex and Hiram leaned against a sleeping Talon, who was curled up like a cat. Inez and Saya snuggled together against a wall. Inez decided to stay awake, doubting she could sleep in a room full of caretakers. But the warm body curled beside her, and the exhaustion proved too much for her. Her lids felt heavier and heavier until she couldn't keep them open any longer, and she was out. When she woke, the room was clear of caretaker parts, and Jingwei, Sparky, and their new friends were gone. Inez cursed softly and headed outside. The others followed, as much from necessity as curiosity, since they hadn't found any bathrooms in the depot. The sky was just brightening, gray tinged with pink. She was relieved to see the caretakers that had protected them. Okay, keepers. Hadn't disappeared after all. You weren't getting in on that? Saya nodded to the circle of Jingwei, Sparky, and the 4 keeper leaders, engaged in their strange form of silent communication. I don't have anything to add, but Jingwei, she should do what she's good at. Not that Inez completely trusted her. She edged close enough to listen in on the discussion, at least the human side of it. Jingwei did her best to translate, narrating as Sparky told the keepers about the teens having some purpose to fulfill, to bring the other people home. After watching that marketing video in the depot, Inez wasn't so sure the keepers would be so eager to welcome more humans back. And it seemed some of them thought the same. The scorpions wandered off into the valley below. Hey, what are they doing? Inez said. They don't want any part of this, Jingwei said. Great. So we just released a bunch more machines into the wild. Really creepy ones. And we can't control them. Go us. Another small cluster of keepers began marching back into the depot. Oh, come on! Them too? Inez said. They're going to inspect the ones who didn't make it out, Jingwei said. To cannibalize their parts? Inez asked. Jingwei looked startled. No, they want to revive them. Huh, Inez said. Seems rather civilized, Saya said. I suppose. These, keepers have already done plenty for us, Inez said. I can't believe we made it out of there alive. But it was thanks to them. Don't forget, we helped them too, by waking them up, Jingwei said. And this bunch says they'll come with us. It was hard to count them while they were moving around, but there were only about 40 keepers left, a mix of the basic model like Sparky, the heftier construction bots, and the one-eyed spider bots. Really? Gabe said. Yes, Hiram said. Thank goodness, May said. I don't feel comfortable being outnumbered by machines, Inez said. But as long as they stay on our side, there's definitely safety in numbers. Inez was surprised at how humbled she felt, that any of these keepers were willing to throw in with a bunch of humans, to help people they'd never even met before. You were right about not all caretakers being perverse death machines, Inez told Jingwei. Respect. Jingwei flashed her the victory sign. So, now that we have some help, Saya said, what's next? Now we go to Sanctuary and save our friends, Jingwei said. So it's our friends now? Inez raised her eyebrows. You were right about some things too. We're all in this together, right? Inez grinned. We're finally in complete agreement. This has been Remade, Season 2, Episode 9, Power Struggles. Written by E.C. Myers. Narrated by Laurel Schroeder. Audio produced by Amanda Rose Smith. Musical theme by Amanda Rose Smith. Copyright 2017, Cereal Box Publishing. Production copyright 2017, Cereal Box Publishing.